This is Psych in 5, where you learn about mental health in 5 minutes or less. We're going to look into what is considered normal because it is a very loosely used term and deserves to be addressed. In layman's words, it is what is typical, usual, or something that is expected out of a person. Now, by definition, normality is a behavior that can be normal for an individual, which is called intrapersonal normality, when it is consistent with the most common behavior for that person. Or, normal is basically what one does on a regular basis. Normal is also used to describe individual behavior that conforms to the most common behavior in society, or what we all know as conformity. Historically, we have all accepted that being normal was the correct way to go about it because everyone else was normal. So, by that definition, if one fine day all humans grew a tail, that should be normal, right? Because everyone else has a tail. That misconception of normal starts with us thinking that not being part of that normalcy club is a bad thing, and one should seek help if they don't fall into this category. And that's not the case at all. To clear all doubts, psychologists use the 4Ds to determine if someone needs help or not, or what the doctors call it, a diagnosis. The 4Ds are, firstly, deviance, and that is when they don't follow the rules set by society and have one calls a deviant behavior, like, say, alcoholism or sex exploitation, or simply being a concern to society in general. Second is distress. And that is when someone experiences something unpleasant, like a bad emotion that may get too overwhelming, and this is usually identified by the person themselves, and they go and seek professional help. Things like being exceptionally sad, angry, or not having enough energy despite a good night's sleep comes under this. Third is dysfunction, and that is when cognition, behavior, or emotions don't work right. It breaks down. It revolves around the disturbances of one's thinking, changes in behavioral patterns, or having unstable emotions that just doesn't seem right are part of dysfunctioning. And then finally, the last D is danger. It is when one can be harmful not just to themselves but to others as well. They present a threat to society and self in their actions or thinking. For example, if one was alcoholic, they do not only destroy their liver, but also is a terrible friend and an even worse parent if they were one. It is basically psychology 101. If someone who is qualified and certified to diagnose sees that someone has any of the 4Ds, they determine if someone is a menace to society. Otherwise, they're just fine and no one needs to interfere and tell them that they're not okay. Not being normal does not mean you're not okay. You're perfectly fine. It is only sad that people come to recognize this much, much later, after the damage was done. Back when witches were a thing, they were probably burnt because they weren't following society's normalcy and they were different. And then finally, when asylums were introduced, thanks to this lovely gentleman named William Tube, and people started to get back to their senses that witches can't exist, people immediately assumed that if you're going to one, you're crazy. If you remember Beauty and the Beast, Maurice, Belle's father, was threatened to be sent to an asylum because people assumed that it was the worst kind of punishment one could receive. Many other horror movies came up after that, set in an asylum because that's where people went through a living hell, right? And we can't blame the people back then either because we are no better. We think the opposite of normal is abnormal, first of all, which it isn't. What we need to understand is that being different is being unique. No one can possibly be normal because everyone has their own quirks and traits. And it is high time that we all start celebrating that. So, in the end, being different is the new normal, I suppose.